Deer stressing. Does shooting a deer cause it stress, and does that stress go up or down if using a copper bullet? We go stalking with test tubes to find out. Sharply dressed shooters, we visit the military tailor who's also making affordable bespoke shooting gear. And if you're a Fieldsports Nation member, you could be the one being measured up at the barracks. Led by the nose, a gun maker stands up for toxic shot. Low stock in shops following Brexit. Rifle and shotgun imports have gone from a tidal wave to a trickle. So what's the problem and who's sorting it out? We have news, we have hunting YouTube. Welcome to Fieldsports Britain. If there is one word that gets hunters' backs up, it's cruel. Is this cruel? Antis say it is. And if it is cruel, how cruel? Can we calculate cruelty? It's not quite the same, but we can measure relative stress. Cortisol is known as the stress hormone. Scientists have documented cortisol's levels in studies on game animals from boar to moose to deer. The more stressed, for want of a better word, the animal, the more cortisol its body produces. We can't know what a stressed animal feels. It might be no worse for them than running for a bus is for us, but we can test when that hormone is pumping. Someone who knows a lot about cortisol is Tim's stalking buddy this morning, Tristan.
So after the animal's been shot, lead or copper, I've got heparinized sample and I've got normal serum samples. I'll collect that from the jugular. I'll then get these home as quick as possible. I'll spin the heparinized and turn it into plasma, and I'll send this whole blood off to vet services up in Scotland, and within 3 days I'll get an answer of how stressed that animal was from being shot.
As well as a serving fire officer, Tristan is doing a master's degree. He is studying the difference in cortisol levels in deer shot with lead and copper rounds.
Some of the studies I've got behind me show that animals that are hunted in a certain way, specifically ungulates like deer, have a stress reaction to certain hunting methods. So if an animal is pursued by dogs, battus, or maybe even helicopter, they get an increase in cortisol response. But what's never been done is no one's actually looked at lead versus copper to see if this transition to copper is as humane as lead. And so far the data's showing no significant increase in flight distance, no significant increase in cortisol stress. And I'm getting readings from about 5 nanomoles per litre, and I think the highest is about 35.
To put that in perspective, on one outing Tristan needed to shoot a deer that was caught in a fence. That deer's cortisol levels were 143. Cortisol bumps up the glucose level in the brain and the bloodstream, while adrenaline increases your heart rate and elevates your blood pressure. Back in the 1990s, a report by a Cambridge academic found cortisol levels in red deer hunted with hounds and then shot were 10 times higher than deer shot by stalkers. His report led to a ban on stag hunting on National Trust land, and many believe gave Tony Blair a scientific excuse to ban fox hunting in 2004. Then there's the abattoir. What this table also shows is the levels of cortisol in red deer transported and killed in an abattoir. Once again, these levels are much, much higher than what is obviously the most efficient, stress-free way of killing a deer, a lone stalker.
If you're getting 5 nanomoles per litre, that animal is not stressed. That animal has literally been humanely dispatched, cold, in the most efficacious, humane way possible. And that's what's good about this study, because it's showing the same results, or no significant difference between lead or copper bullets.
Lastly, let's touch on the dead deer running. Is a shot deer charging 10, 20, even 100 metres after the bullet's impact becoming more and more stressed as it goes?
Earlier in the season, I shot a doe in the field behind us. The doe ran 80 metres, it was 83 metres. It was desperate to get downhill into cover. And when that animal was sampled and that was sent to the vet, it came back as 20 nanomoles per litre, which is, you know, just minimal. It's not a significant figure. So that animal hasn't been stressed when it's been culled, regardless of whether it was lead or copper.
So that is comparable with the sample you would take from something that dropped on the spot?
Yeah, I've had animals, not aware I was there. It's been browsing within a herd, so grazing within a herd. It's been knocked on the spot, hasn't even moved, and then it's shown a 25 nanomole per litre. It's not related, it's not bullet specific, whether the animal is stressed or not.
Tristan has done everything he can to reduce the variables in his study, from standardising shot ranges to the clothes he's been wearing. But these are wild animals and they will react to all sorts of external factors: temperature, other deer, road noise, food availability.
I know we're obviously talking about copper and lead here, but regardless of projectile, I think hunters would take heart in the fact that what they're doing doesn't stress animals. They're taking animals out of the wild really efficiently.
Without a doubt, qualified stalkers are essentially doing a precision job here.
Tristan would like to thank Thomas Jacks for the loan of the thermal, GMK for the Sacco ammunition and research advice from Basque. If you have questions about Tristan's research, please leave them in the comments below and we'll pass them on to him. Thank you, Tristan and Tim. Lots to consider there, and please let us know your thoughts. Now here's someone who has lots of thoughts, which explains the medication. It's David on the Fieldsports channel News Stump.
This is Fieldsports Channel News. Police say they're not going to charge a gamekeeper for shooting buzzards because they can't identify him. The RSPB filmed the gamekeeper on an unnamed estate in North Yorkshire. The RSPB says the keeper was shooting buzzards and the decoy was a live owl, but it filmed the man at a distance of 3 miles, so police only have the RSPB's word for it. They decided not to take it. Meanwhile, BBC celebrity Chris Packham says all gamekeepers are criminals because they're all tarred with the same brush as keepers who break the law. In a tweet he said law-abiding keepers need to sort out their criminal colleagues. The National Trust is under fire for culling a herd of fallow deer. The organisation allowed the herd at Dereham Park near Bath to reach 200 animals. An outbreak of bovine TB led to all the animals being shot. Local deer managers say the correct size of the herd, given available browse, is around 70. As the League Against Cruel Sports experiments with its Exmoor Deer Sanctuary show, concentrating large number of deer is a really good way to spread bovine TB. As well as its deer failures, the National Trust does not allow badger culling on its land. The Scottish Gamekeepers Association is calling on people to sign its Rural Workers protest petition. The SGA is collecting names on its website that it will share with the Scottish Government and politicians after its online protest on Friday, the 19th of March, not the 14th of March, as we said in last week's show. The association says rural workers are overlooked when politicians in Edinburgh are making laws that affect them, and the system needs to change. It points out that the Scottish Green Party wields far too much influence for an organisation that represents less than 1% of the constituency vote. Fish Legal and the Angling Trust are taking DEFRA and the Environment Agency to court over river pollution for a second time. Together with the WWF, the anglers accuse the government of dragging its feet on tackling agricultural pollution of England's rivers, streams and lakes. In a statement on its website, the Trust says the most vulnerable waters are those protected in law, such as sites of special scientific interest and special areas of conservation. The case originally went to court in 2015 because of pollution in water protection zones.
In England and Wales, there are big failures. Wales is slightly further behind, but it's doing very little apart from denying there's a problem.
An animal welfare group backed by the PM's fiancée, Carrie Simons, claims that fish are suffering. The Conservative Animal Welfare Foundation argues that the welfare of fish has not been given the same attention as other animals, and their mental well-being should be protected. The group says the portrayal of fish as stupid and unsophisticated has stopped this from happening, according to the Daily Mail. The fish welfare study particularly takes aim at commercial fish farms and types of trawling. Ferret owners have been asked to be vigilant after thefts in Kent. 4 ferrets are missing from a house in Ashford. The disappearance comes days after 30 ferrets were taken from an animal rescue centre in Polehill Lane, Harwich last Wednesday night. Another 2 ferrets were reported stolen on February the 16th. Kent Police are appealing for information, calling them directly or anonymously on Crime Stoppers. Butcher shop, the ginger pig has been hit by vegan vandals. A post on Unoffensive Animal website celebrates the smashing of a window as the rich slept contentedly in nearby flats. The culprits also brag that not even the police can shield you from whatever is coming your way, without elaborating. The menacing post also calls for destruction to all who hold commodities above life. Wildfowlers from across Northern Ireland have come together for a conservation effort. The Loch Beg Conservation Project aimed to raise £600 to build 50 wooden nest tubes for local duck. In the end, it raised nearly £2,500 plus donations of materials, and as a result, it built 100 more permanent metal nest tubes, padded with hay, plus traps for vermin, with £400 left over to donate to local charities. It brought together dozens of shooters from both Loch Beg and neighbouring Loch Ness. An African tribe plans to take European animal rights groups to the International Court of Justice for violating its rights. The Makua tribe of northeastern South Africa wants to take Western animal rights organisations and CITES to the United Nations top court for violating the rights of indigenous tribes to manage their own wildlife resources. The Makua tribe is attracting interest from other communities, governments, NGOs and politicians in what will be the first class action on woke neo-colonialism. Thanks to Richard Walton for that story and to Jens Hoeg for posting this video from ZBC. Animal rights extremists have shut down a racecourse and a vaccination site. Protesters locked themselves together on the Golden Gate Fields racing track in California, cancelling horse races and closing the vaccination clinic in the track's parking area for about 3 hours as well. Police cautioned them for trespass and released them. A group called Direct Action Everywhere claimed responsibility. And finally, researchers say releasing 100 mutant squirrels will help reduce the population. Squirrels that have been genetically modified to spread infertility genes could be released into the wild to bring down grey numbers, according to a study at the University of Edinburgh. The Telegraph newspaper says DEFRA is looking at options for controlling grey squirrels, including culls and contraceptives. The study, published in the journal Scientific Reports, found that releasing just 100 mutated squirrels into a population of 3,000 would wipe out the population in 15 years. Meanwhile, TV presenter Jeremy Paxman is defending his tactic of shooting greys while sitting on the loo. The University Challenge host calls them a menace and annoying because they scare away songbirds. You are now up to date with Fieldsports Channel News. Stalking the stories, fishing for facts.
Thank you, David. Now, we have done a lot about alternatives to lead over the past few months. So, for balance, gunsmith Mark Crudgington explains why he thinks lead is good, and Andrew Venables points out why it's bad. Let's start with the fun bit. I get to buy a pot of hydrochloric acid and try to dissolve metal in it. Why hydrochloric acid? Because that's the strongest metal dissolver in your stomach. Which metals? Lead shot, steel, bismuth and tungsten, because they are all found in shotgun cartridges. Then I leave them for an hour to cook, and while they are doing that, here are some of the highlights from the debate between pro-leader Mark Crudgington and anti-toxica Andrew Venables.
I've spoken to quite a few GPs and surgeons, none of whom have ever seen any cases of lead poisoning. There's a lot of instances, in fact, of iron poisoning, but most of that seems to come from iron supplements. Lead basically isn't in our stomachs long enough to have any reaction from what the science says. This whole thing, it just sort of beggars belief. If lead was as poisonous as some people are trying to make out, and especially the 9 organisations, there must be some evidence to show that it is this terribly dangerous metallic compound.
I agree with Mark Crudgington. Right? I don't want a lead ban. I don't seek a lead ban. Where we differ, and we agree to differ, is that I think the best way to move forwards in the face of an almost inevitable lead ban isn't to stand like King Canute being drowned by the tide. isn't to spend millions of pounds of NGOs' members' money trying to defend the scientifically peer-reviewed indefensibility of lead in food in any form, full stop.
But lead compounds have been used for certainly a couple of thousand years by humans in various forms. The Romans used to use lead acetate, which is known as sugar lead, to sweeten their wine. In fact, it was used legally up until the 1980s, I believe, to sweeten certain wines.
The people who smelted lead in Rome died. The people who ate off lead and pewter plates in the Roman Empire died. Yes, there's lead in the ground, but it is not going directly into the food. It is not like shooting it into meat, having lead particles going into the meat, having that go into the food chain.
Metallic lead itself, I can find virtually no evidence to say that it is directly poisonous. I've probably eaten in my lifetime very many shotgun pellets and probably very many fragments of lead from the deer that I've shot and butchered myself and consumed.
But if you squeeze the trigger and you move a fragmenting lead projectile into meat and you want to put that into the human food chain, the options are becoming increasingly limited on that one.
I mean, I'm nearly 60. I've shot all my life. I've eaten game all my life. I work with lead. I've worked with lead for the last 42 years as a gunsmith. I feel perfectly healthy.
So what have we got? Well, over here on my left, your right, we have lead in hydrochloric acid. And what's it doing? It's producing a few bubbles and some scum, which is not what the internet said. The internet said actually that it wouldn't really react with hydrochloric acid. But if you put lead shot into something like your stomach contents, well, maybe that's what you get. Next one is tungsten, and hardly a flicker. There's maybe a couple of bubbles coming off. That's the rock steady eddy of metals. If you can afford it, £2.70 per cartridge, but no reaction whatsoever with your stomach contents. This one, however, steel shot, particularly nasty. It produces ferrous chloride, iron chloride, and that is poisonous to people, and that yellow colour should tell you just how nasty it is, especially offset by the blue of the Lyle Vale Express cartridge. And finally over here on the right is bismuth. Bismuth in hydrochloric acid produces bismuth chloride. There's a little bit of bubble action there. Bismuth chloride, butter of bismuth, you use it for treating syphilis, if any of you have got a syphilis problem. Thank you, Mark, thank you, Andrew. And there is a long version of that film if you click on the link in the description below. Next, we are off to visit JM Clean Cut Tailoring, where an ex-sniper is dressing guardsmen and gamekeepers.
When you make something for someone, you can put it on a hanger and you can admire it as much as you want, but until you put it on the back of the client and the client stands up that little bit taller, you know you've done your job well.
People come in all shapes and sizes, and one size fits all is a fantasy. No one knows that better than Jonathan McIntyre. He's a sergeant in the Scots Guards, and this sharpshooter knows how to handle a pair of scissors as well as a 308 L96.
As a military tailor, we're only in charge of the alterations of these. These are actually bespoke made by Crudgington partners. They come in every Thursday, they take measurements of the soldiers as they come through. Cash is a good 6.5, 7 foot tall chap. Has had to go out, they had to order some extra cloth to make sure that they had enough in for him. The height of the guy. He was a bit of a unit, yeah. Big Rhodesian.
You don't wear a bearskin as well, do you?
I do, yes.
Oh my! Where does the bearskin put you? What height?
I'm 6'7", and then obviously probably another 2 foot on top of that with the bearskin on.
Yeah.
So I feel safe.
So yeah, bearskin's a 1.5 foot.
1.5 feet. Yeah. So
you'll be easily 8 foot.
Jonathan is lucky to be alive. He survived a shot to the chest in Afghanistan in 2010. He lost a lung and shattered some bones, but his recovery didn't stop him missing the start of the shooting season just weeks into his recovery. His passion for shooting has driven another arm of the tailoring work. He is now producing tailored shooting garments.
This is something that I've just finished making the other week there, so I was just taking the basting out as you came in. This is your typical gilets that we've been making here. Everything's made to measure, everything's bespoke by us. You're getting what you want, you're making it for your needs and making sure it's fit for your purposes.
So you were able to work as a military tailor, but also work in other aspects of tailoring as well?
Yeah, so one of the joys of being in the army is the army is always trying to push you and inspire you to continue to do well. So part of that was to start my own business, JM Clean Cut Tailoring. Started making just basic things, kilts originally is what I started in with the accent. Then we moved on, being a keen shot, I decided, well, I can make breeches, I can make gilets, I can make jackets. And started going down that route of being able to produce good quality garments in the UK, but we're able to keep the margins to a minimal and pass that saving on to the end user, the guy on the peg.
The clothes are not to dress a wardrobe, they're to be worn in the field. He designs each jacket, gilet or suit to the shooter's shooting needs. Big hands need big pockets. Are you actively stalking or beating, or just on a peg? In that case, you'll need the freedom to move like Fred Astaire and bend it like Beckham.
Fred Astaire insisted on such a small armhole in his jacket because it allowed him to lift his arm without the base of the jacket riding up. It's almost contradictory to what you would believe, you know, that way. You would think, oh, I need a bigger armhole, that gives me more movement, I need more space. Where, ironically, you don't want more space. What you want to do is make the angle tighter so that it can pivot a lot easier. So if your armhole's smaller, you can get the gun up into the shoulder, you can mount the gun correctly. That comes from my military tailoring background, where tunics are designed like that, so that the guys can actually have their weapons on them. They can lift their arms up when they're marching, and it doesn't ride the jacket up and doesn't end up sitting round the rib cage.
This is not a normal tailor. It's an event with Wellington Barracks right next door to Buckingham Palace. Not only will Jonathan understand your shooting needs, you get to experience some amazing military history and hear plenty of stories.
And the whole JM experience.
And you get everything thrown into that. You get Johnny McIntyre for a few hours, nibbling at your ear, telling you all the woulda, coulda, shouldas, and yeah, you just get the whole thing. You get, you know, being a shooter myself, I understand the needs. I understand that all us shooting people, we're very like-minded. We get on incredibly well. Come down, if it's late enough in the afternoon, we might even have a whiskey.
Jonathan's tailored shooting jackets for men and women cost about £400, with most of his three-piece suits under £1,000. For more information, go to jmcleancuttailoring.com. So, do you fancy some new tailored threads, plus a chance to experience some amazing military history within sight of Buckingham Palace and no sign of Harry and Meghan? Well, you need to be a member, so sign up today to be in with a chance. Here's Jonathan to explain more.
Hi, I'm Jonathan McIntyre, the owner of JM Clean Cut Tailoring Limited, and I am offering anybody who is a member or will become a member the opportunity to win a bespoke, tailor-made shooting jacket of your choosing from any one of these cloths here. So sign up and get a chance to win one of these fantastic jackets. Get down to see me after this pandemic's done, get down into London and we'll look after you.
Thank you, Jonathan. And he will be back in a few weeks to talk about Busby's and where they get the bearskins. And thank you to everyone who has signed up as a Fieldsports Nation member. Next, Brexit. Has it stopped our guns? Hold up at borders, dastardly European officials. Some European countries behaving differently to other European countries. Anyone importing any goods will tell you they are finding the new rules tricky. The border officials trickier, and gun importers are no different. RUAG imports goods including RWS ammunition from Germany and Perazzi shotguns from Italy. Mark Swift says he had poor support at first from the UK government.
The government departments didn't understand the consequences of what was going on, by the sounds of it. Whenever we were trying to contact them, it was taking forever for somebody to come back with even the simplest of questions to start with. And as you can imagine, we're not the only industry that was asking them questions at the time. So yes, of course, it was it was a bit of a mess at first, but I think it's now starting to sort itself out.
I think because it was so late and it was lastminute.com, nobody had any chance really to thrash out the finer details. And I think they've just gone on what they thought would work, but all these other things and complexities are coming out the woodwork and nobody's got any answers.
As well as importing, PBS exports to Europe, while Blaser imports from Blaser's factory in southern Germany.
The licensing got a bit more pricey, and then you need a customs agent for every import. But that's quite good, because it doesn't matter if you import a single rifle or a pellet, it's per customs declaration. So if you bring in a lot of goods, that's fine.
All this will have an effect on prices of shooting kit in the shops.
Of course, we had a price increase in January to cover all of these costs, because it definitely more work, more cost, more time.
So are there differences in behaviour between officials in different European countries?
The issue we had was the transiting of France. That seems to be the biggest issue for us. Although we think we've now solved it, we are trying a shipment which has actually left the factory in Italy today, the Parazzi factory, and we are trialing the first shipment now. So we'll know in a day or two whether it's got through or not. But the transit permits for France have been, let's say, difficult to acquire.
The most complicated thing, I would say, is definitely the German export license for us at the moment, because our open import license and export license actually is still valid from the UK side of things. So that's all right. But because the UK is not part of the EU anymore, they're regarded as a third country now by the German government. So it doesn't matter if you're the US, if you're South Africa, if you're Australia, or if you're the UK now. You need a new license, a different type of export license that takes 4 to 6 weeks, where normally for a license within the EU, we needed maximum of 6 days. So that's a massive time difference that we have now for the licensing.
It's the border officials, customs officials, and general just sort of apathy when it comes to shipments coming in from the UK and going to the UK. So, we've got all sorts of weird and wonderful problems that nobody's ever envisaged. One is origin. I mean, we've got a big client that imports lots of European clothing, hunting clothing, and branded items for field sports and whatever. And then they're selling them on to non-EU countries, some of which have got preferential trade. So there's no way of getting a movement certificate for origin for EU goods.
Frederick can now apply for licenses for Blaser rifles and shotguns in advance, which makes his German gun importing process easier. The problem, says Gary, is that there is no consensus over what constitutes a gun, and that means even some courier and shipping companies are turning down contracts.
Now that there is a customs deck that has to be done, it draws the attention to it. And I'm not talking component parts. I'm not talking anything that requires a license, anything that is illegal. I'm just talking like a forend or a grip or anything along those lines, and it's refused. So you've got all this sort of cargo that is being sold to Europe that is being held because all the major courier companies don't want to touch it because they believe it's not appropriate, even though it is, and there's no actual government restrictions to do it. It's their own internal policies.
One of our suppliers put some springs in the post and for a repair, and they described it as shotgun spares. And the only issue when it arrived in the UK was DPD don't take anything to do with guns, so they turned it back because they'd sent it by DPD. But that was just because of DPD's policy.
A client just fell on his scope, and we had to get it to Germany, to the factory, to get it fixed. Obviously, you need to put in the customs tariffs code now to send it back to Germany. We put in the code, everything flags up as rifle scope, and all the shipping companies said, oh, rifle means firearms, therefore we can't handle it. But to make him understand that these are actually optics and they can ship them and everything, it took us 3 weeks to find the correct code now and negotiate with everyone. But there we are. These are the smaller implications, I would say. I think the bigger chunk of the business is now sorted.
And that's the main message. Bureaucracy combined with British bureaucracy have made it a tough first quarter. But now the import-export process is becoming easier as border officials feel more comfortable with the new rules.
Initially, we had some little issues around how things were classified, especially shotguns. But it looks like all that's been sorted. That was easier to sort than the imports. Let's put it that way. We can fly stuff back to Italy if we want to. It's not a case of can we get it there. It's just how long and how much at the moment.
So now you have a customs exit entry, which is 50 quid maybe, and then you have to have an import entry to get it into the country of destination, namely France. But if it's going further afield, you need a transit document to allow it to travel through Europe and end up at its final destination where it will be cleared. Because you can't do a customs clearance in France for a shipment that's going to Germany, because they've got two different fiscal VAT rates and there's different. Well, it's a different country. You can't pay VAT in one country and then claim it back in another. So they won't actually allow you to clear it. So if you had a commercial shipment on a vehicle, it would get stuck in Calais and wouldn't go anywhere unless you had a transit document. So that's another 50, 60 quid. So all these are added down the line and the net result is more cost.
Surprise, surprise. And what we don't know is what happens when consumers start to come to the UK to shoot birds or deer, or UK shooters start to go abroad with their own guns. If this has been an issue for you, please let us know in the comments below. And now from the narrow world of British and European borders to the wider world of hunting and shooting on YouTube, it is Hunting YouTube. This is Hunting YouTube, which aims to show the best hunting and shooting videos that YouTube has to offer. Let's start with fishing, and thanks to viewer Ian Law for this one. It is 3 generations of his family catching spring salmon on the River Tay on the same beat on the same day, which is one of those wonderful sporting moments. Staying in Scotland, Circuit Wild Harvest is culling does, plus a few other bits and pieces that he's up to. It's how our favourite expat Portuguese guy is living the Highland high life. Vermin and Pest Control Scotland is dealing with rats in a farmyard using a Walther Rotex RM8 fitted with PARD NV007 digital scope add-on and new infrared. Mr. Johnson's working terriers are back on the rats too. They are out in the brambles in Rat City for more fast action rodenticide. Pest above the rest has rebranded. It is now the Derbyshire Countryman. Here's Tim keeping down feral pigeons in the farmyard. Quite a lot of German in this film, but that's no criticism, if only I spoke German. What's interesting about it is we usually see chamois hunting high in the mountains of Europe or New Zealand, not so often in Bavarian forests as shown here. In Pakistan, back in 2013, but only just out on YouTube, Indus Safaris takes Brian Harlan and Danish cameraman Patrick Montgomery into the mountains for spectacular big game. And finally, Deer Culling is a short wildlife documentary by Robbie Watkinson from something called the Biome Project. It says a lot of annoying stuff, but the photography is good and it gives you a snapshot about what environmental groups want to do to deer, which of course means it barely mentions shooting. Certainly not the glorious sport of deer stalking. That's it for this week. I've put all these films into a playlist for you. Click on the eye symbol top right or check this film's description. If you have a YouTube film you would like us to pop into the weekly top 8, email me the link, charlie@fieldsportschannel.tv. Well, that's it for this week. If you haven't done so, please whiz over to our website, fieldsportschannel.tv. You can click like us there on Facebook and on Instagram, follow us on Twitter, subscribe to us on YouTube, and best of all, pop your email address into our register page and we'll contact you about the show. Fieldsports Britain, it's at 7 PM UK time every Wednesday. And this has been Fieldsports Britain. Good hunting, good shooting, good fishing, and goodbye.